to do this here, or I can use this too?
Yes, you should be able to use it up and down. But I'm going to click on the share, and then if you want, I can give you the mouse.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sharjah Research and Technology Park webinar in collaboration with the United Nations Conference and Trade and Development. We are very pleased today to have Ms. Shamika Sariman, Director, Division of Technology and Logistics as UNICTAD. Today we are very excited about discussing and knowing about UNICTAD roles in advancing and promoting technology and skills across the world, and also the key roles that UNICTAD play in technology and transfer and enabling developing countries developing their technology ecosystem. So on your behalf and on behalf of the Sharjah Research and Technology Park, I would like sincerely to thank Ms. Shamika for making the time and accepting our invitation to be with us here despite her busy schedule. So Ms. Shamika, thank you very much for being with us here today. I think if you can please stop the sharing for now. Ms. Shamika, you want to say a welcome word or an introduction word?
Thank you very much, Hussein, and I'm very happy to be with you with the Sharjah Research, Technology and Innovation Park for this event. And I know the amount of work that you have been doing in promoting innovation in your country and also sharing this experience with the rest of the world. And I think so this is a very good opportunity for us to come on board and work with you closely and share the experience that UNCTAD has had and bringing innovation and technology to developing countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mika. And for us today is really is very important to show your global vision and how basically you work with different organizations in developing local mission and local activities. We share the same vision and collaboration with various entities around the world. So with your permission, I would like to maybe run you and run our audience quickly about SRTIP and what we are up to. And then I think what we will do is we will allow the key component of this webinar for you to share with us what is UNCTAD doing and what are you up to, especially post-COVID-19. And I think after that, we will open the floor for question and answer. So I would like to maybe share screen now and start the presentation. For those who are not familiar with the Sharjah Open Innovation Majlis, this is an exercise or a session that we normally run every month with thought leaders and high-profile individuals to share with them and with you their vision and work on developing technology across the world. Again, this is starting from Sharjah, a city within the United Arab Emirates that is known for education, culture, and industry. And we at the Sharjah Research and Technology Park, mandated by the Sharjah government to spark and promote innovation. And this session is part of our plan to help build relationship, exchange best practices, and know-how among the various groups. So, as I said earlier, Sharjah is a center really when it comes to education, innovation, and R&D. The Sharjah government is known for its determination and commitment to education. We invest every year more than $1 billion in developing our education ecosystem. We pride ourselves to be the capital of education and innovation for the Middle East. And I will tell you more about that. But This is our SRTI park. It's a 19 million square feet piece of land dedicated for technology and technology development. We have 4 main objectives, and I guess these 4 main objectives also goes hand in hand with any nation or city that is trying to build innovation. We try to build innovation ecosystem by not only building the infrastructure, but also building the mindset and relationship and best practices. And hence, this session today comes under the umbrella of developing this ecosystem. The second thing, we also, like any other country, we try to generate employments and create new opportunities for young people to grow and basically fulfill their hopes. And 3, we catalyze the knowledge economy and invest in the future, number 4. So we believe that new technologies are great enablers to help societies and countries grow and support their economy and their GDP. As I said earlier, we believe and we have a global vision, but with a regional mission. So we believe that through partnership, we can build capacity, we can build opportunities, we can build technologies. So we believe in having global vision where we connect and engage with international companies, international institutions, the like of UNICTAD, and also research institutions from all over the world to help basically build the ecosystem. We are really a platform that allow companies to access the market here. So we believe we are an ideal market access platform, and we are an ideal platform to create and identify opportunities for companies who are interested in setting up in the Middle East, especially with focus on technologies related to additive manufacturing or VR or water or agriculture technology. So we've been having since 2019 more than 25,000 visitors. We had more than probably $100 million worth of investment in the park. This is varies from the investment in transport and logistics to agriculture to additive manufacturing, and we have so far more than 50 companies and since 6 anchor deep tech projects, as I said, related to 3D construction, photovoltaic, agriculture technologies, mass transport, additive manufacturing. We focus on 6 main areas around water technology, production design and architecture, mobility and logistics, digitization, renewable energy, and environmental technologies. We believe in the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm very proud to also today have Ms. Jamika, because I think she will talk about the importance of these goals and how these goals are embedded in developing technology. So we embed the Sustainable Development Goals in every projects we develop, and we take this as an integral part of doing business within the park. We have some examples to show you today. This is a technology related to agriculture technology, which is a growing topic in the Middle East, using things like hydroponics and aquaponics and vertical farming to help develop and transform the desert into really producing lands. And of course, this hits the number 2 zero hunger objective of the Sustainable Development Goals. This is another example that we have at the park, which we are very proud of, Vigi Tech Farms, another technology company that develops agricultural technology to help support and fulfill food security. We also have technologies related to artificial intelligence that we deploy for health and also other activities. This is a company called Virtue from Spain that also developed technologies through artificial intelligence to help support health activities. We have another company that is also related to health, focus on women health. It's a hybrid company, Nepta, that promote technologies to support women health. We have developed technologies related to virtual reality and augmented reality. Again, we are using these technologies to help improving education, the education experience. As I said, we are a city that hosts the biggest universities in this region, and it is important for us to bring technologies to support education. We are developing renewable energies, whether they are solar or other forms like wind and other forms of renewable energies. We are creating various enablers like the Sharjah Open Innovation Lab. This is a makerspace that is dedicated for entrepreneurs, for colleges, for private sector to help develop smart manufacturing and help entrepreneurs venture into smart manufacturing. We are a demo for different technology that support sustainable cities and communities using less and less pressure on the infrastructure. We are using technologies like the 5G to develop, again, sustainable cities and communities. We are using 3D printing to help develop responsible consumption and production, using 3D to print metal, plastic, and also houses. We are very proud that we created, or we did deliver face shield during COVID-19 response to our healthcare professionals and security, which was very much appreciated by the government and the private sector. As I said, we are using 3D technologies also to construct houses, and we promote entrepreneurship through promoting fascinating projects like Kafu, which is a fuel delivery app that delivers fuels into your house or offices 24 hours. All what you need is to download the apps on your phone, and they come and fill your car while it's standing there, cutting on CO2 and others. We are very proud to promote next generation transport and logistics. This is a company called Skyway from Belarus that is developing next generation trains. This is our flagship project. And we work with different United Nations institutions to promote the concept of technology and promote technology transfer and knowledge. So we believe in partnership. This is just a snapshot on what kind of companies we have here and what kind of institutions. We work with R&D institutions, the like of Fraunhofer, Vito, and others. And we are very keen to develop this ecosystem here by attracting businesses to set up here and by creating an open innovation platform that will promote technology transfer and that will help enable communities and nations to really venture into technologies. So this is my last slide. And I will stop here. And without further ado, I would like to also now ask Ms. Shamika to maybe present her work, and then we will go to the answer and question. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, Shamika.
Thank you so much, Hussein, and it was a very interesting presentation. And to see how far you have gone with technology, and also to see how much you have linked the technological development for science tech, SDGs. And I think this is extremely important. And this is something that I'm going to mention in my talk. We don't see that in many countries. You know, the technology is one thing, SDGs are another thing. This connection has not been made. So I'm very happy that the way you work in the Sharjah Innovation and Research Park is to combine technology for people, not technology to do things out there. So thank you so much. So let me now begin my presentation. So I will take you through, as you said, you know, we are living through the post-COVID or the COVID world. And I will talk a bit about how to use science, technology, and innovation when we stage a post-COVID recovery. Okay, so I will start doing that role of STI in post-COVID recovery, and I will then talk a bit to STI for sustainable development. And this is where the link is very clear with the park. And then, of course, as you mentioned, I will also talk a bit about the work that we do in UNTAD. So just want to let you know, I think the way that we look into the STI for post-COVID recovery is to say that the science, technology, innovation contributes to building resilience of societies to shocks. And these shocks could be like what we have now, the epidemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, or it could be a shock to the environmental shock to the system or economic shock. And the STI would help us, the economies, to build resilience. And the STI would help us to develop our economies into more diversified system, and more diversified our economies, and a lot more resilient we are. And then I will also talk a bit about collaboration. I cannot use this. Okay. Let me start about the STI for resilience. I think, we are not just talking about the frontier technologies, but we are also talking about how to harness indigenous knowledge and engaging citizens partnership. And it's extremely important when we think about building resilience of a country, it's extremely important to build their community resilience. So the bringing technologies to the communities and getting communities to address a problem in a more holistic manner rather than in a silo manner, and making sure that these communities are armed with innovation to take forward the activities of making their communities more resilient. And now let me talk a bit about the digital technologies. We play a bigger role in this COVID-19 pandemic. As you have seen, we live in a virtual world. I mean, this discussion is happening this way. This is partly because of the COVID-19. And basically we live on internet. We work remotely, we do telehealth, teleeducation, and we do e-commerce, and we connect with our friends and families using internet. And we have seen that the digital technologies have played an enormous role of keeping the economies rolling forward in the societies be connected. What it also shows is that the people who do not have digital technologies are in a bad shape. You see, and this is half the world's population that do not have access to internet. So the lockdown for them have become basically a shutdown. There is no education, there is no telemedicine, there is no teleworking for the half the world's population. So our message to the governments is that no longer digital technologies could be identified as an option. This is not a luxury good. This is a technology which is critical, and it has to be put in place and very quick, quite fast. The connectivity needs to be there quite fast if we are going to recover from COVID-19 well, and if we are going to walk into this new digital technological revolution and to benefit from this revolution. As you know, I think you probably, that in several technological revolutions have come and gone. The last one that came our way, and extremely important for developing countries, is the Green Revolution, and it totally bypassed continents. It bypassed Africa, for example. So you do not hear famines in Asia now, but that used to be the case in 1950s. But with the agricultural revolution, Green Revolution, the famines were not a concept that is popping up in that region. But in Africa, it still is the case. So you see the impact when a technological revolution bypasses a continent. So we are quite vocal in UNCTAD to tell our member states that it is extremely important to have the connectivity, and plus to have the electricity so that this connectivity can run. Access to internet is almost a right. I think we have seen with this COVID-19, and if you do not have access to internet, you're basically left out of the life as it unfolds in the digital realm. So this is something that I want to put to you, and this is something that we work very intensely at UNCTAD. So now let me talk about a bit about the open science and collaboration. And this is another thing, another aspect that has come to fore during this COVID-19. The pandemic has illustrated the potential of open source platforms to connect scientists and researchers from across the world, especially in developing countries where there is a likelihood of barriers in the diffusion of knowledge. Now, let me give you the examples. In January, for example, mid-January, a team of Chinese researchers announced the genome of the new virus, the COVID-19, and the genetic map was made available freely for access by researchers worldwide. And that is when the whole the collaborative work began to develop a vaccine. And we have also seen, and let me give you another example, a team of engineers, physicians, and computer scientists, and others at the MIT have been working on a low-cost ventilator. And it is an open source design. It's an open source design, and it was taken up then by a group of Indian engineers who then built low-cost ventilators to ease India's shortage during the pandemic. You see, this is the kind of things that can be done with open source research and open source, open science and collaboration and data sharing. And I believe this is going to be the new normal as we come out of COVID-19. But again, as you can see, the connectivity, be connected to these researchers, be connected to the innovation centers. Simply having internet connection is extremely important if you want to benefit from open source collaborations. Let me now talk a bit about how can then, okay, let me see, I think there's some problem. Just a minute, please, I think, okay. Let me talk about a bit. We are concerned actually in UNCTAD that the STI could take the back seat. You know, we are going through a big economic crisis. This is a global economic downturn. And normally when in an economic downturn, the first thing that happens is that all the countries would have incentive packages. You know, they would they would have economic packages to ease the fallout of the crisis. So that's good. And in that period, R&D, the STI also gets some funds, and this is what we have seen. But what happens is next, once these packages are over, and comes a period where the countries have to tighten their fiscal belts, and at that stage, one of the first things to get cut in government budgets are the STI expenditures, and this is a concern. Because what we have seen when we happened in the last crisis, you know, the global economic crisis of 2008, and if you look at the 1997 crisis, what we saw was once the STI ministries are being cut out, and it's very difficult for them to recover. It's very difficult for them to start doing the work they have been doing to connect the innovation, the private sector, the universities, the innovation institutes, and so forth. So this is something that we like to mention and make sure that keep the funding and support to R&D and STI initiatives as we go through the recovery period. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the best way to handle a situation in a budget crisis is to foster international cooperation and coordinated policy response. So let me now, I think, Hussein, you talked about the STI for sustainable development. If you look at these goals, and you will see very clearly that STI is a key contributor to every single goal, all 17 goals. And this is very clear. But I am not just talking about the frontier technologies. There's a new wave of technologies coming our way. And we are also talking about very simple technologies that are still not used and still are not available to a large proportion of the world population. Now, you mentioned the zero hunger. So because I think, you know, for your region, these are big issues. And we have looked at the food security issue in UNCTAD. And this was we prepared a Secretary General, United Nations Secretary General report on food security. We looked at the genetic sequencing, nanotechnologies that's come our way, weather models, the precision agriculture, early warning systems using satellite data, and also gene editing that's coming our way. And there are many ways that this new round of technologies can help food security. But to handle the whole food security issue, we are proposing you need to look into a systems approach. You cannot just take one problem and throw some technology at it. You need to understand the entire system. So here is the agricultural innovation system for you. And you can see, I wouldn't go through this, but you can see it's not a simple thing that you can just take some technology and throw at it. You really need to understand. You really need to study the innovation systems and see where the technology can be inserted. And this is I just gave you a couple of examples about the frontier technologies, but it is not just the frontier technologies, but the old technologies are still very much needed, and they are not accessible to farmers. So it's the same story about the affordable STI, how to make STI contribute to the affordable and clean energy. And here also, there are many ways of doing things using technology, smart renewable energy generation to maximize the use of renewables, optimizing real-time power supply, and the system's predictive monitoring. So I like to put here, the countries have different renewable energy pathways. There's no one way, and there's nothing called one size fits all. And the policy mixes are also different, depending on the path that you have taken. And in all these things, international collaboration is something that comes up again and again. International collaboration is extremely important, sharing experience, sharing best practices, and also lessons learned in bringing renewable energy to a vast majority of population. And another thing that Hussein, you mentioned is about the sustainable cities. And this is the goal 11, SDG goal 11. STI contribute to sustainable urbanization in a variety of ways, including through new capabilities in spatial planning, socioeconomic research, enhancing cooperation between urban departments, optimizing mobility, and enabling sustainable resource management. You see, and I think you mentioned about the mindset. I think that reorientation of mindset is extremely important, because this is not just, again, it is not about throwing technology at cities, but it is looking through how to bring STI into the urban governance system. So again, we need to have a systems approach and to handle these issues. Now, let me get to my third part about the partnerships and cooperation, and let me talk a bit about the work that we do. We at UNCTAD, we are an intergovernmental body, and we do have an intergovernmental policy dialogue where we bring all countries to the table to share their experience and concerns, especially with regard to frontier technologies. I'll talk a bit about that later. And then a large part of our work is about STI capacity building, and we have several programs, and I will tell you some of the lessons that we have learned in delivering our capacity building programs that would be of use to many of you out there grappling with policy. So let me start with the intergovernmental policy dialogues. You see, in the United Nations, there's a Commission on Science and Technology for Development. It's called CSTD. And this commission is basically the focal point of the UN system, looking at science, technology, and innovation for sustainable development goals. And this commission, for example, we just met in June, and it was a virtual meeting. We talked about two things. We talked several things. One is the COVID, STI for addressing COVID-19. We talked about space applications for sustainable development. And we also talked about frontier technologies. for sustainable development. So this is a gathering of ministers. It's a ministerial level meeting where the ministers would discuss policy, and they also would talk about the concerns arising from technologies. So one of the things that is being discussed in this commission is the concern many have about the governance systems around these new technologies. You have the AI, you have the big data, the gene editing, and there are no ethics and internationally agreed ethics and guidelines of guiding these technologies. And it is a concern that these technologies, yes, they could bring enormous amount of benefits to the world, but they could also bring challenges and risks. And for example, when you look at the machine learning and the AI combination, you can very well have algorithm bias. Your data can create biases against women and other vulnerable groups, ethnic minorities. And once the AI is making decisions with this bias in their models, and this can create new pathways of inequality, and this is a concern. Take gene editing, CRISPR-Cas9, and this is a very powerful technology that comes our way. And the amazing thing about this new wave of technologies are that they are increasingly becoming cheaper to use and increasingly becoming easier to access. So in a few years, or I don't know, maybe not few years, in a couple of years, the CRISPR-Cas9 technologies could be used in labs that do not have the most sophisticated equipment. And that, where are the ethics of using this the genome editing, for example? These guidelines and ethics don't exist. So this has been a concern raised at the Commission again and again. And this is the kind of things that the world comes together to discuss as we walk into a new era. And the Commission has become a platform to offer capacity building efforts to other countries. It's a bridge for those who have technologies to share their knowledge with others. For example, we do have a program with China. China has offered through the Commission a platform for developing countries to learn from China's experience, and especially doing technological parks. Because as you know, Hussein, you have done it very well and very successfully, but many times that we see that the technological parks have come and gone, they have been established at huge cost to government, and then they have not been able to attract investment, and they just become white elephants as far as it's a drain on fiscal resources of many countries. So there are many things that needs to be in place for the technological park, the science parks to work. And so as what you are doing right now, sharing your experience, and China has put together a program where the developing countries, experts, and the policymakers are invited to China to showcase the work that they have done, how they have developed these programs and lessons, and what to do and what not to do. Now, so that's the Commission. We would very much welcome. The Commission is a multi-stakeholder forum, and we very much welcome all of your participation. So next Commission is happening in next May, and it will meet on blockchains for development, and it will also talk about STI for health and digital technology. So I invite you to be party and to the Commission, and please check the website, and there's an enormous amount of information and knowledge and best practices there. And now let me talk a bit about the capacity building work we do in UNTITLed. Let me start this program called Sti Policy Reviews. What we do in this program, this is all done by request from member states. We go to countries and basically assess their innovation systems. as I said, and I think we are very much in the forefront of saying this to member states, that we simply cannot throw technology at a problem. You need to understand the systems. You need to take a systems approach to understand the problems and see where the technologies and can be infused into the system to make it work well. So what we do in the STI policy reviews, we analyze the entire ecosystem, innovation ecosystem of a country. We look at the governmental policies, we look at the regulatory structures, we look at the financing capabilities, the education system, whether the education system is ready for innovation. And most importantly, we look at the private sector. What is the enabling environment that is created for private sector? Are these different parties working together? Are they connected? And where are the connections broken? And how can the governments and private sector work together to create these connections so that the innovation system functions? And this is what the STI policy reviews we do. Let me give you a couple of lessons we have learned doing this STI policy reviews across the world. You see, even though the governments have appointed the science, technology, innovation ministries, as there are many, in many countries, I think majority of countries, there are STI ministries. However, they are at the very far down below in the totem pole of governments. They are not powerful, and they're not powerful ministries like, of course, the finance ministry or big transport, environment ministries. They are very small ministries down there somewhere. And these ministries are grossly underfunded. And STI ministry finds it extremely difficult to keep talent. And many times we find STI ministries are full of scientists, and there's no concept of the bringing STI to bear upon the larger population. But in many times the scientists would want to do papers and get published. So there is a governance issues starting at the STI ministries. And this is something that we have been talking about. And of course, I think many of you know, because you are involved in your countries in doing policy, and there's a big gap between the students that we produce out of universities and their skill sets that don't match what the firms are looking for as per firms, especially for innovation. Third thing we have seen is financing is a real difficulty, especially now for digital technologies. And this is the scenario. And most of the time, the digital entrepreneurs are young people, because they are the ones who do the e-commerce, they are the ones who come up with the platforms, they are the ones who runs with the platform-based taxi companies, tuk-tuks, and so forth. And when they go to a bank to raise funds, there are two things. They're young and they don't have the wherewithal to get a bank loan, and they are operating in the digital with digital technologies, and the banks do not understand. Banks would rather give funds to retail sector, or to manufacturing, or to other financing activities. But these new activities done by young people do not get funds, and this is a real concern, especially given that this new wave of the technological revolution, this is a digital revolution, and if our young entrepreneurs cannot flourish in this world, this technology is going to come and go without benefiting all of us. So this is the kind of things that we see in this when you do STI policy review. So I think it's a good exercise for governments to undertake this STI policy reviews, with us or with somebody else, to really understand the innovation ecosystem and to see where to address big problems. Let me now, my last point is about the technology assessment. Let me talk a bit. You see, technology assessment used to be a popular thing in 1970s, but it's no longer the case. But it's extremely important for you to have a technology assessment system so that you know what are the pathways of these new technologies, how this new, especially this new wave of technologies, and what opportunities they bring, and what are the risks and challenges that these technologies would bring, and how do we make sure that we maximize the benefits and minimize the risk. And for that, you need to have a very deliberate technology assessments done. So we at UNCTAD are just beginning a program to do technology assessment mostly in African countries and on two issues, on agriculture and energy. And we will have more information as we are, another year or so, the results of this technology assessment. So this is the kind of work we do. And as I said, just to finalize my thoughts, STI is a key enabler of SDGs. We will not be able to achieve SDGs if we do not have STI. And I am not just talking about the new technology, but also the old technology. And then the second point is, you simply cannot throw technology at a problem. You need to understand the entire ecosystem. I think, Hussein, you mentioned the ecosystem several times. You need to understand an ecosystem of a problem or a challenge. And then you need to understand where the technology STI can make an inroad. And then lastly, I want to mention what we are living through a technological revolution, and we simply cannot let this technological revolution bypass the vast majority of the people in the world. And we will walk into extremely dangerous world if we let this digital technological revolution bypass 50% of the world's population. Thank you very much, Hussein.
Thank you very much, Sharmika, for this comprehensive explanation of how your organization works and support countries and different institutions. I have a few questions, if you don't mind. My first question is, how can organizations such as, for example, technology parks can engage with your organization? And can universities also engage with your organizations, or you only work with ministries and certain governments?
No, this is a very good question. We do work with everyone. In fact, we would want to work more and more with technology parks, because as I mentioned, this is the technology and innovation parks is in many countries, it's almost like the thing to do. And many countries believe if you have a technology park, I think, okay, technology will come. But as you have been explaining, it's not that easy. You need to have an ecosystem. You are, for example, in a university town, and you are tapping into skills, and you're tapping into financing. So that's how these technological parks succeed. We would want to work with many partners as possible, and we are just an email away from you. The work that we do largely is on the policy, because we do advise the government ministries and regulators and so forth, because private sector is extremely important, but the private sector needs the enabling environment for them to flourish. And that enabling environment is provided by governments, the infrastructure, the critical infrastructure, the skills, the financing, regulatory structures. They need these things in place for private sector to flourish. And these systems are put in place by government. So it's extremely important to work with governments so to get the enabling environment.
The other questions I have, what practical steps can a country take to engage actively in the work of the CSTD? How can a country or organization be proactive and engaged in these discussions and these activities?
Okay, so now you see because it's an intergovernmental meeting, so it's a ministerial meeting, the CSTD, the proper. But what we do is around the commission, we bring entrepreneurs, we bring women entrepreneurs, the youth, tech parks, space agencies, to have a dialogue during the entire week. So it becomes a multi-stakeholder forum. The real panel is pretty much an intergovernmental meeting, but what happens around the 1 week is an enormous amount of lessons and sharing of experience by various stakeholders. So please check out the CSTD website. If you type the CSTD 2020 or just CSTD to Google, you will go to the website and you will see the next session, and drop us a line and say, we want to organize a session to share the experience of technology parks, and we would create the opportunity for you.
I'm trying to, there's a long questions, I'm trying to read it. So there are comments that they are endorsing your point that technology parks can be ideal, let's say, champions of what you are trying to do because they are more practical. Another questions we have here is what UNICTAD is doing to help developing countries, countries with not much resources, to strengthen their science, technology, and innovation capacity, and what role, therefore, member states, let's say, like the UAE, to play?
Okay, this is a very good question. So what UNCTAD does is, we basically go to developing countries. We assess their, through this Sti Policy Reviews, we assess their ecosystems. We advise governments what steps needs to be taken. And we do talk to, these are the huge multi-stakeholder consultations are done before these recommendations come forth. And we also assess the readiness of countries for the digital economy. We have a whole program called E-Trade Readiness Assessments. And we go to countries and see how ready they are to engage in e-commerce. So this is another program that I was not going into detail. And here we look at the country systems, whether they have the connectivity, whether they have financing, whether their regulatory structures are ready, the payments systems are ready, skills are ready, and especially we give emphasis to women entrepreneurs, whether they have opportunities to do e-commerce. So we basically assess the readiness of e-commerce. So many of our work that we do with government is to assess certain systems and to advise the policymakers and the multi-stakeholder groups to take how to take forward STI for development.
Can you share with us some of your priority objectives, let's say for 2020 and maybe 2021? What are your, let's say, top 3 programs that you are looking for to roll out and engage various stakeholders?
So one thing, Hussein, we would like to work with you, for example, is to build, we do have a capacity building, we have capacity building seminars, and we do this in regions, regional capacity building seminars. And we pick the critical areas of concern for a region, and then we bring all regional stakeholders and experts and the technological parks and the universities together, and we build capacity of a region, how to do policy. Now, for example, one of the things we would love to do, and we have a lot of requests, is exactly on technology parks. How to make technology park a success. What are the prerequisites and what needs to be in place to make this park success? So this is something that we do in China, and this is also we would very much like to work with you, for example, and to bring this kind of knowledge. Now, so that's one thing that we want to strengthen. The second thing, as I mentioned, is the technology assessment. And especially given this digital, the new technology is coming our way, and it's extremely important for governments to have the capacity to assess the pathways of these technologies and to make sure that they're planned well, to make sure the plans are there to bring technology for sustainable development goals, and to make sure that these technologies would not harm, they would not bring unintended consequences. So this is the second big program. Third big program that we will focus more and more is on the Science, Technology, Innovation Policy Review. I think it's extremely important to have innovation systems ready and to absorb this new technological revolution. And the thing is, innovation system is not, these are not very fashionable things. You know, the science policy, the technology policy, you know, it's just, the policy is not fashionable. You know, that we are not cutting some ribbons and opening some buildings and so forth. But without right policies, it will be extremely difficult for developing countries to absorb and adopt and adapt these waves of new technologies coming their way. I'm talking about the AI, the IoTs, the big data, and so forth. I know people, a lot of people will think, this is so far away from us. But the thing about these digital technologies, they are the movement of these technologies are extremely fast, and they can be they are becoming easier and easier to access, and the costs are coming down. So there could be huge benefits for developing countries if the countries are ready. So this is where the ecosystem.
Thank you. So I have three more questions before we end. There is a question on what benefits UNICTAD can bring to the flourishing of technology parks. What can UNICTAD provide these technology parks?
Okay, you see, I think what we need to, you see, in UNCTAD, we don't do technology parks, but what we do is we study those who have done technology parks, and we study the success. What are the key ingredients for success of technology parks, and what countries need to do to get their technology park successful. I'm sure there's a lot of our audience would have seen, there are many technology parks everywhere you go, every country you walk into, they just throw enormous amount of money to develop technology parks. And 5 years down the road, these technology parks have not, attracted investment. There's no backward forward linkages. You know, they are very contained. They would produce something and just would export, and there's no employment generated. There's no materials being sourced from the surrounding environment, and they remain as enclaves. And most of the time, they remain as enclaves for a little while, and then they close down. And then, so what we bring is the lessons from technology parks, and we would like to take this to developing countries so that they do the right things to make sure that the technology parks would work. So these are more capacity building programs for developers or the thinkers and the policymakers of technology parks.
Thank you. There is a question for both of us. I will maybe start with my part and then I will hand over. So what says, what kind of support can UN and the technology park provide for innovators and researchers, not government, but innovators and researchers, for example, in the field of sustainable energy? And is this kind of park just for enterprises or for individuals? I will answer this part quickly from a perspective of SRTIP or our park, because every park has their own value proposition. In our park, we provide different value proposition. We provide, first of all, the space and the ecosystem for companies and for innovators. We also provide support and mentoring. We provide, in very specific cases, funds. We provide enablers like accelerators to help them grow and compete and connect, and things like the maker space where they have access to technologies like rapid prototyping, 3D printers, CNC machines, textile. So we provide different services to different individuals. There is no one size fits all. And we do support individuals and organizations. But back to you, the question is, do you only support or work with government, or you also can support innovators and researchers?
Thank you. You see, most of our work is with governments. But what we do is we link the governments with the private sector. You see, because in many times when we do our capacity building work, when we do especially our STIP reviews or e-commerce readiness assessments, and many times we find it's the very first time the private sector and the government and all the other stakeholders are sitting in the same room and even sharing their concerns. So what we do bring is this bridge to bring various stakeholders, including the private sector, to talk to the policymakers, because this is one of the biggest problems in many countries is there's no link between the people who make policy and people who are on the ground innovating and makes goods and services. So that's our role, the bridge to bring these two parties together.
Thank you. So the last questions I will ask is, or actually there was a question about the seminars. Yes, these seminars that hopefully we will coordinate with UNCTAD will be open for people to attend and develop. We will inform you when those programs and seminars are ready. There was a question about, this is more about Sharjah, but I think this is general. I think this is a key question, that universities and technology parks invest a lot of money into innovation and into building platforms, etc. But when it comes to real return on investment, tangible ones, they are not clear. And I think a key component of our collaboration today, or our session today, is this specific point. How can we benefit and leverage all these investment goes into these building technology parks? And the UNCTAD has to do also with global trade. How can UNCTAD also help this ecosystem really promote their innovation ecosystem and actually link them into global trade chain and growing their businesses? That's my last question for today.
Okay, then now that's a big question. I would need like a whole day to discuss. But let me tell you, our business is to convince policymakers to do the right thing, and our business is to bring the various voices of, especially the private sector, to bear upon the policymakers who are making policy that ultimately would determine whether the private sector can flourish or not. So what we do is, I think I have been saying before, we simply do not think that throwing technology at a problem is a solution. We believe that, yes, it is very boring and it is very tiresome, but you need to have an ecosystem approach. You need to understand the entire innovation system, and you need to see where the links, it had to be very well connected. The financing, the education system, regulatory system, the policy, the private sector, all be all very well connected. And where it has had these connections, like for example, South Korea, is where we see technology flourishing. So what we bring to you is to analyze your ecosystems and see where the broken parts are and how to fix the broken parts, how to establish these connections. And please, if you are, please look into, you go to the UNCTAD website or type Science, Technology, Innovation Policy Reviews, and we call them STIP reviews. And you will see many STIP reviews are being done, across the world. And if you are interested, please get in touch with us. And as Hussein said, we like to do more seminars to bring this global knowledge that we have been, we are a think tank, that we have created an enormous amount of knowledge in-house, looking at what's happening across the world. And we would like to share this with also all kinds of stakeholders, not just the policymakers. So this is what we would want to do with SRTIP. Thank you.
This is a great timing because we are on the dot with 3 p.m. Shamika, I would like really to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate your time and the wealth of information you shared with us. I'm sure everybody benefited from knowing what you are doing, and I hope our participants will go back to their community and to their ecosystem, spreading the word of the best practice your division provide countries and help institutions to develop their science and technology and innovation policies and capabilities. I hope we will work together to be maybe a regional focal point that we can also help our neighboring countries spreading the word and spreading best practice, with the hope that this will create new opportunities and new businesses and new jobs and a better economy for all of us, inshallah. Thank you very much for your time again, and I appreciate your presentation. And on behalf of Sharjah Research and Technology Park, we would like sincerely to thank you and thank your team also for working with us on this webinar. Also, on your behalf, I would like to thank our participant for taking the time and participate with us. I'm sorry if I did not answer all the questions, but please email us. We will be more than happy to engage with you if you have any inquiries. Thank you, Sharmika, and have a good day as well.
Thank you very much. And it's been my honor to be in seminar, and we continue our partnership.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone out there.